In Anderson Hall on the beautiful campus of the University of Nebraska. Welcome to the Unlimited Sports Pregame show. I'm Justice Rhody.
With Logan.
A colossal test for the Huskers today as they travel up to the frozen north of Ann Arbor, Michigan to take on the number 3 ranked Michigan Wolverines. And what's sure to be a physical test for the Huskers. Logan, give me your initial thoughts for this Barstool christened Bussin' Bowl.
Yeah, well, obviously that's going to be a lot of fun over social media. I'm sure we're going to get some good memes and stuff out of that. But today for Michigan, it's going to be all about Blake Corum, right? He's a guy that a lot of people are throwing out there as a potential number 1 running back in the country, right? He's fifth in yards, first in touchdowns. He hasn't fumbled this year, highest in PFF grade, and you know it's going to come from that gap running scheme.
Absolutely. You talk about the gap running scheme. Blake Corum leading the country not only in rushing touchdowns, total touchdowns, and total points as well. So he's a big factor of what they want to do. But let's not overlook Donovan Edwards. Okay, he's the second part of that 1-2 punch right there. While Blake Corum brings the speed, Donovan Edwards is a true power back. And like you said, Michigan's going to run that gap scheme. They're going to implement some zone elements as well. They've got trap blocks. They love to flow to an outside zone scheme every once in a while to try to free up into their RPO stuff that they love to do. So multiple looks out of Michigan and Jim Harbaugh's Wolverines. Why don't you shed some light on the style matchup between these two? Because we know Michigan, physical, downhill, ground team, loves to be stout on the defensive end. The Huskers, more of a pro-style offense, love to spread the ball around a little bit to the playmakers on the outside. How do you think this matchup's going to really shake out for both teams?
Well, I think it's actually going to be really interesting for Nebraska, right? Obviously, Casey Thompson has been ruled officially out for this game, so there's a little bit of a question as to what their offense is going to look like. Are they going to lean on that backfield of Grant and Yet a little bit? Are they going to trust a guy like Smothers or Purdy to kind of air it out to their very talented receivers? Because without Casey Thompson, there's a real question of if they're able to do that. So as far as what Nebraska is going to bring out, I know Mickey Joseph has said in a lot of interviews they're going to pound the ball, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them stick to this pro-style offense.
Yeah, and it's been a real question mark this week about who's really going to get the looks. I mean, they've been splitting the reps pretty much 50-50. It's been Chupa Purdy. It's been Logan Smothers sometimes. So just kind of like a gray cloud over who we really think it is. Some fans want Smothers. Some fans think Purdy's the guy that we rock with. Nobody really knows for certain like who's going to start. My bet's on Logan Smothers. He's more experienced, brings an element in the option offense.
As is mine.
So we kind of agree there. But how do you think that, regardless of who the backup quarterback is, how do they succeed against a stout defensive line like Michigan's?
I actually think the weather up in Ann Arbor could play a big factor, right? I know it's around 30 to 40 degrees there right now. And I think if the Nebraska defense is able to come out and be physical and stop Blake Corum from pounding the ball down their throats, they have a chance to win this game, say, 20-17.
Yeah, you're absolutely right talking about that. It's got to be a close game. You've got to keep it close. You've got to chew clock. You've got to force Michigan to make some bad mistakes early. J.J. McCarthy, their starting quarterback, is a freshman, was playing in high school last year, granted for one of the top programs in the country in IMG Academy. But he's still a freshman. He's still young. He's still a little green around the ears. So you've got to force him, play tight coverage, and force him to go to that passing game early. If you can stack the box with multiple different looks, get some linebackers in there, blitz a safety every once in a while, you've got to make the freshman uncomfortable. Just want to, talk about, we obviously talk about the Michigan offense. The most underrated part of that offense, the true engine of it, is the offensive line. Can you shed some light for us on how they've kind of utilized that and how Jim Harbaugh has kind of taken that from an NFL style to now he's getting these similar downhill maulers in the college game, helping Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards to be super successful?
Yeah, well, the Michigan O-line is one that I believe is the best O-line in the country.
As do I.
I think, right, if you pair it up against the Bamas, the Tennessee type O-lines that are really, really good, I think theirs one's out, right? And I think Harbaugh, he has a lot of experience with O-lines, right? If you look at those teams he had with the 49ers, a lot of them ran through the O-line, right? They started with that O-line to enable that kind of downhill offense, and he's bringing that same thing to Michigan. He's getting these huge, very physical guys that aren't afraid to get hit and take hits, and they're really just taking it downhill, right? They're being more physical than teams, and they're better well-coached than teams.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And this offensive line has been trained. They're gap sound. They block their assignments super well, whether it's zone and the guards pulling and they're basing out, or whether it's a gap scheme where they are it's a back step and then downhill at guys. They're so technically sound, and they run their schemes to perfection. And Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, I mean, you could run a Mack truck through there. It's crazy. It's like a 2-lane highway, and you could just run it right through.
Yeah, there are times I wonder if you and I could score behind that O-line.
Genuinely. We could legitimately run for about 50 yards behind that offensive line. I'm quite convinced. So speaking about that, what does Nebraska have to do to penetrate that offensive line and truly shut down the engine of this Michigan offense, which is that ground game?
I think a big part of it is actually going to be bringing corners off the edge, right? I think it's going to be slot corners coming out of the outside and forcing the Michigan O-line to respect that and allocate guys to that, because that's going to allow them to have true one-on-one matchups down like the middle of the O-line in the 3-4 gap, and that's the only way they're going to win, right? And obviously they're at a disadvantage there, but they're going to have to manufacture those one-on-ones and force the Michigan O-line to actually beat them, not schematically, in more of a man-to-man way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And Michigan's going to have to respect that. They're going to have to allocate some of those blocking tight ends they've used in the past. They've always been very good at developing tight ends, not only to block, but also to get those little chip and go routes, a little release and go sometimes. But you're absolutely right. I think it comes down to schematically. Can the Huskers match up in man? Can they shut down a versatile passing attack that Michigan can unleash with the downhill shots off the run game? They love their play-action plays because they know that everybody's king on Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. So it's about what the Huskers can do, whether they send multiple guys off the edge, whether they run some stunts and twists like we saw last week against Illinois. Some different little wrinkles right there. I just kind of wanted to take this time, shed light on the job that Jim Harbaugh's done, because he's been there for a little bit now at Michigan, and everybody was kind of skeptical, thinking he couldn't win the big one against Ohio State, but now he's turning this culture, and he's finally imprinted his fingerprint on this team. How do you think the recruiting trail has helped Jim Harbaugh out, and how has his pitch changed from when it initially started?
Well, he's a guy I think he should be heralded with the Lincoln Rileys, the Nick Sabans, right? He is on that level. And he's really bringing a great culture, right? You see in a lot of interviews with his players, they are truly bought into what he is in the Harbaugh system. And I think that's really important in a college program, right? You see the same thing with Alabama and Saban. And I think they're fostering that very good culture there in Michigan that could last for another decade or so.
Yeah, you're absolutely right talking about that. Jim Harbaugh has really, I thought, switched his recruiting pitch from we're Michigan, the blue and the gold, the victors valiant, pitching the Michigan culture. And he said, here's our identity. Here's where you fit in. Here's where your cog goes into this machine. We just need you to fill it in, do your job, and develop properly. I think he's done a great job in kind of flipping that. And talking about Nebraska now, Mickey's picked up some recent steam on the recruiting trail. He's getting a lot of these guys in his Louisiana foothold. He's brought in Arnold Barnes, a 3-star recruit running back there, a flip from Tulane. So how do you think Mickey's kind of transformed the recruiting culture at Nebraska here since he's been interim head coach?
Yeah, I think Mickey's been a huge part, right? I was able to speak to Malachi Coleman a couple weeks ago at his recruitment, and he basically said, Mickey is the reason I'm here. And Mickey will be here, right? So whether that's about the head coaching job or as a head recruiter or an assistant of some kind, we get to know. But Mickey's a huge part of this program, and you see every guy that talks about him, whether it's currently on the team or a future recruit, they talk about him in unbelievable ways. They're like, he has a connection with my family, with me on an emotion level, a football level, and that's really important. And I think that's very big. And it's very big when you look at where he recruits, right? Louisiana is called his playground. People jokingly call it Mickey's playground, and that he gets these huge guys from New Orleans and stuff to come to his schools regardless of where they are. And I think that could be very big for Nebraska's future.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, he's buying into these young men, right? He's not just buying into them as an athlete. He's buying into them as a young man, not as a product, but as a person. That's a big part of his recruiting pitch and how Nebraska wants to recruit these young men, these underrated guys. Now, he's in the mix for Ryan Robinson Jr., a corner out of Edna-Carr, another school in Louisiana. They're in the mix for Junior Sia out in Mountain Ridge, Utah, big 6'6", 300-pound offensive lineman. So you can see they're kind of spreading that foothold around, but still able to get in and get into the places of strength while recruiting well in state. A tremendous job there by Mickey Joseph. So talking about Nebraska again, now more on the schematic side, what is the avenue for Nebraska to go into Ann Arbor and pull up an upset against a very tough number 3 ranked Michigan Wolverine team?
It's going to start with that backfield, right? Anthony Grant and Yant. They're going to be very vicious back there, right? They are physical backs. They are willing to take hits. And I think it's going to be them wearing down that Michigan defense, right? The Michigan defense is very well coached. And I think they're going to have – those two specifically have to physically beat the linebackers, right? It's going to be – they can get to the second level, but what do they do at that second level? And I think that's when Grant and Yant have to make it happen.
Yeah, you talked about the second level right there. Michigan's so technically sound when wrapping up or when tackling in open space. They're very technically sound. They have missed some occasionally. We saw last year in the real game against Ohio State. They missed a couple big ones against Travion Henderson. He was able to rip off a couple. So it takes elite balance and vision to get into that second level, but it's also, I think, going to be predicated on the offensive line. Can they give the backup quarterbacks, whether that be Logan Smothers or Chuba Purdy, time to throw the ball and get a good ball out cleanly? And can they lean on that Michigan defensive line and put them on the back foot early?
Right.
So now kind of switching around to the other side of the country, Bama Ole Miss. There's been trouble in Tuscaloosa. There's been reports coming out saying Pete Golding and Bill O'Brien are as good as gone at the end of the season. There's going to be some major staff turnover. Bama on average turns over about 16 staff members a year, so there's always turnout because there's in such high demand around the country. But how do you think Ole Miss can kind of play on this trouble in Tuscaloosa to lead it to an upset in Oxford?
I think Ole Miss is going to have to play very technically sound, right? As inconsistent Bama has been in the past couple weeks, I think they're obviously going to come out with a fire, right? I think that's going to be part of the reason they're going to win this week. But in order to Ole Miss to win, they're going to have to play perfect football, right? Nick Saban will not allow his team to lose back-to-back games. He does not allow that. So I think Ole Miss is going to have to be perfect this week.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And Lane Kiffin's a former Nick Saban assistant. He's a very, very good offensive mind, and some would say a genius on the offensive side of the ball. I think it also comes down to Bama. Will they deploy that vaunted cheetah package that we've been hearing a lot about? Because as people know, Dallas Turner, Will Anderson, and Chris Braswell have not been on the same defensive line front all year. They have not put their three best pass rushers on the line at all this year at the same time. So that comes down to scheming. Pete Golding is a great defensive recruiter, but he hasn't been that great at scheming his best players on the line and getting pressure. And I think that Ole Miss, with Quinshon Judkins and with Jackson Dart in the backfield, obviously Jackson Dart, a very high-rated quarterback recruit out of Corner Canyon, Utah, played at USC last year, was very prolific. They're going to be a big factor in this. So what do you think Ole Miss has to do on the offensive end to get past this Bama defense and expose that secondary like Tennessee did a couple weeks ago?
I think they're going to have to come out firing early. It's going to be about getting those deep cross plays out early in order to kind of establish like a technical dominance, right, and more of an agile dominance and less of like a strength one. And I think that's going to be a big part of it. I think it's also staying consistent throughout the game. Bama's shown a really good ability in the past to adapt throughout games. And if they can kind of adapt as well with Bama and counteract what Bama's changing at halftime, say, then I think that could be a big key for victory for them.
You're absolutely right. And also, this game is in Oxford. It's an Ole Miss home game. Bama, for the first time in the Nick Saban era, they are the worst they've been in the Nick Saban era. They've lost twice. Again, both games have come on the road.
Right.
At Tennessee and at LSU. So they have lost both games on the road. The crowd is going to play a huge factor in Oxford this week. It's going to be really big to see. What do you think Bama has to do from an offensive standpoint? I know they've been playing a lot on Bryce Young, and he is the undoubted best player in college football right now. What do you think they have to do to take some weight off his shoulders and allow that offense to fully function?
I think it's going to be with the O-line. I think the O-line's got to step up today. They were a little shoddy against LSU. And I think if they're able to step up and give Bryce Young a lot more time to make the throws that we know he can make because he's just such a special passer, then I think that's going to be a big key for them. I also think, I know you said it's about getting Bryce Young help. I think it's a big game for Bryce Young. I think he needs to step up and show that he's not a quarterback who's going to lose 2 games in a row on such a talented roster. And I think that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, kind of shifting right here, Iowa, Wisconsin. This is kind of a man-in-the-mirror battle, if you would. Right. I mean, it is 2 identical programs. They play the same physical, predicated on the defensive side of the football. Who do you see taking the victory here in Iowa City, and what do you think of the key for both teams to truly establish a winning pedigree today?
I think Iowa's going to come out with like a victory by a field goal. Now, whether that's 17-4 or 6-3, we'll see, right? Because these are 2 very physical teams. And I think if Iowa's offense even comes out with like a heartbeat at all today, I think they're going to come out with the win. But obviously, it's going to be about those defenses, right? And I just don't think either of them is going to let up a whole lot of yardage. Yeah,
and we talked about it before the show, but I think it's going to come down to Wisconsin's run game and Iowa's defense are going to be able to negate each other. It's who scores more points between Iowa's offense and Wisconsin's defense, because we've seen Iowa has struggled mightily early on the season. They're starting to pick up some steam, albeit against subpar competition in the Big Ten West. They're starting to pick up some steam on the offensive side, so I think that's where that comes down. But what do you think needs to happen for Iowa to scheme open some more points? Because this is a better-than-average Big Ten West team, and this could be the difference between a pretty good bowl game and we're fighting to even get into a bowl.
Right. I think it's going to be about scheming up some screens, right, kind of manufacturing some easy 6 to 7 yard gains, right? I think that's going to be very important for them. They are not a team that's going to go out and hit the 40-yard pass down the post route, but I think if they're able to get some screens, some kind of flat routes, manufacture some slants, then that could be a big key for them.
So we talked about this before the show. We wanted to shed some light on it. K-State Baylor, obviously a big-time Big 12 matchup, could decide ultimately, with another game we're going to talk about coming up later, who could punch their ticket to the Big 12 championship game. Kansas State's picked up some steam lately. Will Howard has filled in tremendously for Coach Chris Kleiman in a backup role as quarterback, a junior quarterback. He's got some experience, has been throwing the ball well. And for Baylor, Dave Aranda, is this one of those games where he flexes his muscle and shows off a true defensive masterclass?
I think it's going to be one of those defensive masterclasses, right? I just look at the rosters up and down, right? Kansas State might have some better wins right now, but I just think Baylor's a better roster, and they're going to come out and show that.
Yeah, you're right. Oregon-Washington, a big-time Pac-12 matchup that we've absolutely got to shed light on. You're a big Bo Nix guy. I'm a big Michael Penix guy. So this is a great quarterback matchup. Is this a game that we see both teams, combined break the 100 mark?
I think it could be. I know the over/under right now is somewhere around like 75. I really don't think either defense is particularly good, and these are two of the best offenses in the country. I believe Oregon is second in total yards right now, and Washington is second in passing yards, if I'm correct. And this is just a game that they are both going to come out firing because they know they're going to have to put up 40 to win. I have Oregon winning around 42 to 37, 38-ish. But I think this could totally be a game we see go 55 to 50.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree. I think it's going to be more of one of those like 56 to 53 type games, where Oregon wins on a field goal. Bo Nix for Oregon is leading the country in pass completion percentage, 73.3%. On the flip side, Michael Penix is second in the country. Just got passed up last night by Kyle Van Treese of Georgia Southern. Is second in the country in passing yards with 3,232. So obviously both like to air it out. Oregon more of that quick completion, let the athletes work in space style. Michael Penix is just gun-ho, let the ball fly down the field. A really interesting style matchup between Oregon and Washington.
Something else about Oregon that I know they have these like track stars at receiver, these guys that are so fast.
They are fast.
And I just don't think the Washington secondary is going to be able to keep up with that, right? And that's what you said. They get these guys in open space, and they just let them go. And I think we're going to see a lot of that tonight.
Yeah, Troy Franklin out of Menlo Park was a 4-star recruit last year, a big-time piece of what they want to do. He is a 4.2 guy, a very fast athlete. So that's kind of where Oregon's going to play. Now, kind of switching to that other Big 12 matchup, it's Texas TCU I believe it's in Austin.
I believe it is, yeah.
In Austin this week. I thought they might have went neutral site. There was some rumors they might go to neutral site, but it is going to be in Austin this week. Is this the week that TCU finally gets exposed? Is the Texas Longhorn might enough to stop the Horned Frog magic?
I think it is. Texas offense is very, very good. They have an elite front six as well on defense. And I just don't think TCU is able to stop that, right? They establish the run really well, but they don't do it through a very good O-line. They do it through very talented skill players. And I think in college football, when you have a very good front 6-7, like Texas does, that beats these talented skill players. And that's why programs like Bama and Michigan are so successful, because they not only have the talented skill players, they have the O-line to support it. And I don't think TCU does. And I think that's part of the reason they're going to get exposed as a team that's not in the college football playoff this year.
Yeah, the number 2 scoring offense in the nation in TCU. And you talked about the skill players, right? It's Quentin Johnston, who is getting major first-round NFL love, a big receiver, 6'4", 205. It's Kendrick Miller on the ground and Max Duggan in the backfield airing it out. It's those skill players that you talk about, but this is the same front six in Texas that hosted Bama and took them down to the wire, went blow for blow with them, and kind of had Bama on the back foot on the offensive end. So I think, personally for me, I think it's a Texas win, 35-28. I think they win by a touchdown. Quinn Ewers is the X factor for me. Now that he's back in a rhythm, Steve Sarkisian's got his guy. They're able to scheme open. I just don't think TCU has the athletes on the boundaries to guard the Texas receivers. What do you think TCU has to do schematically to kind of keep Texas in check?
I think they have to play some softer coverages, right? Some Seattle 3, some cover 4 type coverages in order to not allow these Texas receivers to just get down the field, because they are better athletes than TCU's DBs. So I think they have to play with some space and allow themselves to not give up big yardage.
Yeah, you're right. Now, switching to kind of like an undershadowed matchup right here, UCF-Tulane, a battle of the group of fives, two historically good group of 5 programs. UConn's come on as of late. John Rice Plumlee has 18 total touchdowns this year. 10 of those are rushing. We saw that. He's a transfer from Ole Miss. We saw that kind of at Ole Miss. And now Tulane, under coach Willie Fritz, has gone up to an 8-1 record. I think they're the best team in the group of 5, and it's all predicated on Michael Pratt, who gave Oklahoma a run for their money last week. What do you think UCF has to do to keep Michael Pratt in this Tulane offense in check? Because they do love to run more of that West Coast or like an Oregon spread type offense. Get the ball out quickly, let their athletes run.
I think you said it. They're going to have to get the ball out quickly and let their athletes run. Genuinely, I think they're a more athletic team than Tulane. Tulane just has the more talented top-end players. So I think if UCF is able to put together a very good team performance, they're able to take this one away.
And UCF, just a great in-state recruiting job by Gus Malzahn, former Auburn coach. He's done a great job transforming the culture there. They're more of a run-heavy scheme like he wanted at Auburn with John Rice Plumlee. But I think Tulane takes this one by a touchdown. I think they're the best team in the group of 5, and they might play themselves into a New Year's Six Bowl if they're not, if they don't mess around.
I can see it.
LSU Arkansas right now. Is this truly the Brian Kelly revenge season? Does he continue to keep the Tigers in the top 10?
I think he does. I think LSU is a legit team. I think they're also going to come out with a lot of fire, right? They had a lot of people saying they weren't going to be that good before the season, and now they're coming out and they're beating teams like Bama, and I think that is going to light up a team like LSU that has very competitive guys, and I think they're going to come out and dominate Arkansas. Arkansas is a good team, but I think LSU is going to come out with a special kind of fire this week.
That game already taking place. Number 7 LSU already up 13-3. The Arkansas defense has already forced Jaden Daniels to throw one pick in this game, but not a whole lot happening. KJ Jefferson obviously out for this game. Malik Hornsby is back up, 4 for 9, 24 yards. Looks like they're going for more of a ground-based approach here. 13-3, still kind of a feeling out process in the third quarter. Low-scoring game there. We'll kind of see how that one shakes out. Now, a topic that I wanted to get to personally, after Brian Harsin was fired, there's been a lot of speculation about Auburn. And I think as an SEC program, they dominate the coaching carousel and how this takes place. Who do you think is the next head coach for Auburn football?
I'm not really sure. I could see it being a guy that's going to bring in more of a kind of West Coast offense, right? They've been lacking that in the past couple of years, so I could see it being a guy like that, maybe even a guy like Lane Kiffin, right? He's competing also for that Nebraska job. But honestly, I'm not really sure, right? This is one we haven't had a lot of information about, but I could see it going a whole lot of ways.
Yeah, you're right. I think the favorite in the clubhouse right now, the consensus is Hugh Freeze at Liberty. Mm-hmm. I think he's the big guy. He's the guy that they want, even though he just got signed to that massive 8-year extension at Liberty. I think Auburn's willing to pay the money. They've already shelled out $36 million in dead salary to both Brian Harsin and Gus Malzahn. So they are not afraid to flex their muscle and throw that money around. Just kind of recapping some previous action, the number 8 USC Trojans took care of business against an abysmal Colorado team. Caleb Williams, 14-26, 268 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, continues to flex his muscle in that Heisman Trophy race. Do you think he's really making a legitimate case in a weaker conference to be the Heisman Trophy winner this year, or do you think he's a year away?
I think he's a year away. I think the biggest issue is that he doesn't have to go up against these kind of SEC defenses, right? The Pac-12 is full of these high-powered offenses and not very good defenses like we just talked about with Oregon and Washington. So I think this year isn't the year. I think next year could be, though, right? They have really talented receivers that are going to stick around this next year, and I think that could be a way that he kind of wins it, right? He's a very talented quarterback. But honestly, a game like this Colorado game, I actually don't think helps him, right? Throwing an interception in that game, he had only 283 yards and a 55-point win. I think that's one where he needs to go out and show, I am Caleb Williams and I am the best player on this field, and he's going to go throw for like 400 yards, right? So I think next year that's what he's going to be able to do. I just don't think this year's the year.
Yeah, and a special shout-out to Colorado back Alex Fontenot, 20 carries, 108 yards, 1 touchdown. Got his work in on a bad Colorado team. He's trying to play himself into a better transfer portal position, probably. Just some more action around the country. Number 2, Ohio State continues to flex their muscle in the horseshoe, 35-7. The spread on that game was 40.5. So what do you think? A live reaction right now. Do you think Ohio State's able to cover right here?
I think they get there. I think they're going to come out. I think Marvin Harrison might just go score like a 50-yard touchdown, right? He's that talented that he can just score on any play. He's already got 107 yards on 5 receptions, right? Showing how good of a deep play threat he is. Xavier Johnson's also very talented in that way, and I just think one of them's going to go get a huge gain.
Yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr. You talked about it before the show. You think he has top 5 receiver in the NFL potential eventually. 5 catches, 107 yards, 1 touchdown. Kate Stover also adding 2 catches for 33 yards and a touchdown. Emeka Egbuka, a catch for 6 yards and a touchdown. So the passing game getting going early. C.J. Stroud, 188 yards, 3 touchdowns. But also on the ground, Mayan Williams, 15 carries, 147 yards, 1 touchdown. Any doubts that we had about this Ohio State offensive line, I think they're starting to answer them. Looking at more action around the country, Purdue in a tight one with Illinois here. We saw this Illinois team come into Nebraska last week and really a couple weeks ago, really flex their muscle. Got upset last week against a down in the dumps Michigan State team. Mel Tucker trying to rebound and establish his culture again. Right now, it's the Devin Maccabee show. It's 16 carries, 87 yards, 1 touchdown. As they're tied right in here in the third quarter, 8:16 left to go. What do you think Purdue has to do to pull off another monumental upset against the 21-ranked Fighting Illini?
I think they're just going to have to continue to be physical. Purdue's a very physical team, and considering it's 14-14 in the third quarter, I think they're continuing to show that, right? Against a very good defense, they are winning in the trenches, and that's very hard to do. They've limited Chase Brown to 62 yards on only 4.5 per carry. That's a good number. It's not good for Chase Brown, right? He's averaging over 5.5 per carry this year. So if they're able to continue to limit him, that could be the key to victory today.
Yeah, Chase Brown's going to get his, obviously. He's got 14 carries, 62 yards, 2 touchdowns. Lower average than expected. They're doing a good job limiting him on that front. And then we're talking about the Aiden O'Connell roller coaster. I've mentioned this previously. 17 for 27, 157 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He's one of those quarterbacks where he can make an absolutely terrible read, and then he'll come down the next drive and throw 5 for 5. It's absolutely wild to see from Purdue. Liberty trying to stay in the top 25. Number 19 Liberty up only a field goal on UConn. So Jim Mora trying to reestablish the Huskies as a bowl eligible team. I think Liberty and Hugh Freeze, he's trying to play his way into a Power 5 coaching job right here. They've obviously rebounded tremendously. Shedding some light around the country again. UNC Wake Forest is a game I had an eye on. Right, you talk about the quarterback play for Carolina and Mac Brown. What do you think they have to do schematically to get past Wake Forest? And do you think Wake Forest can respond with a great quarterback in themselves like Sam Hartman?
I think UNC is going to have to come out, utilize their kind of West Coast system, right? Take some short gains and get their athletes in some space. Wake Forest, something similar, right? They both kind of do the same thing. It's almost a man-of-the-mirror matchup, like you mentioned with Iowa and Wisconsin today. And I think that's one where it could go both ways. I think Wake Forest will win by maybe a field goal, but that'll be a good game. So definitely keep your eye on that one.
Another game I'm kind of keeping my eye on in the ACC again. A couple of great matchups today. Florida State at Syracuse. Syracuse obviously kind of got screwed by the officiating in Clemson, South Carolina a couple weeks back, then went out and just had a bad one against Notre Dame. Notre Dame revenge season is in full swing. Florida State under Mike Norvell has rebounded tremendously. They obviously had that opening week win against LSU. Can you just kind of speak on like the job that he's done, like developing Jordan Travis at quarterback, and how he's kind of turned this Florida State team from down the dumps program to now kind of a resurgence, number 25 in the nation?
He's done a great job, and I think a lot of it is about getting guys to buy in, right? You see that across the country with guys like Mickey Joseph is doing right now, like guys like Jim Harbaugh, and he's kind of allowed them to blossom into the player that they should be, right? You kind of a lot of times see in college football, you see programs try to mold quarterbacks especially around what they want instead of allowing the guy to become what they can become. And I think he's doing a really good job at that at Florida State.
Yeah, he absolutely has, and just coming off a bad, and like he was a great coach at Memphis, had his guys playing the right way, sent a couple guys like Paxton Lynch to the NFL. Just did a really good job at Memphis before moving on to Florida State. Just a quick little feeler right now, just before we get into our game day prediction. Officiating college football, there's been some speculation between what is roughing the passer. There's obviously been questions in the NFL. Can you kind of shed some light on where you think the precedent is, and how do you think the officials can do a better job setting the precedent?
I think there needs to come out and be an official statement in both the NFL and college football on what it is, right? You saw the absolutely atrocious Brady call a couple weeks ago in the NFL. You've seen similar things across college football, and I get especially with college football, these are student athletes. They're not just athletes, right? As much as they want to, go and make millions of dollars through NIL and stuff. And they're trying to protect them and make sure these young men don't go out and, get widespread brain damage like you've seen in previous years, right? But I think there has to be kind of a baseline where it's, okay, this is what it is, right? Whether it's half a second after the ball's released, that's when it's roughing the passer, whether it's a couple steps. So they need to come out and officially kind of declare what it is and isn't. Because we're seeing a lot of big games be affected by it, and people wondering, well, this wasn't called at this point in the game, or it wasn't called in this game. And I think that's kind of confusion for some fans, and that needs to be cleared up.
As does the targeting rule of college football, I think. Game day prediction, Nebraska, Michigan. What do you think?
Unfortunately, I think Michigan's going to win out roughly 42-10. I think they're going to most definitely cover the 30.5. I think it's going to be a stellar performance from Jim Harbaugh and his Wolverines. It's pretty much that simple.
Yeah, I think it is too. I think it's going to be like a 42-10 type game where they just absolutely dominate. Just wanted to thank you guys quickly for tuning in to the Unlimited Sports Pregame show. Right after this, go tune in to 90.3 KRNU. Peyton, those guys do a great job previewing the game. Thank you for tuning in to the Unlimited Sports Pregame show. This has been Justice Rhody.
And Logan.
Just saying so long from the Pepsi Center here on the beautiful campus of the University of Nebraska. So long.